Indeed. But one player that I also expected to see very, very good things from, which hasn't necessarily come into fruition quite so much, is Rivius this season. He feels like he's kind of been working a little bit more behind the scenes alongside a lot of the other Korean practice partners that he works with. But he himself has struggled to find that breakout moment this season.
That's right. Rivius has brought some of the more innovative decks. I think his practice group, along with Chonsu and Don, were the ones to really make Secret Rogue very popular in APAC. Now it's really risen in its bring rate, and I think it's largely due to their influence. We did see Rivius toying around with things like Quest Warlock last season earlier than everyone else, and now he has a chance to innovate once more with both this Turtle Mage in the lineup and a priest that I am just calling Control Priest because it's got two ofs, it's got Galakrond, but it's got 0 invoke cards.
Yeah, I mean, this is so far from the lineup that I would build, I cannot even say. Like, the one conventional deck, I suppose you could say, compared to most of the field, is the Secret Rogue, which is one of the decks that I have been struggling with the most in terms of my ability to play it well. I've really been struggling to get the wins on there, but clearly Rivius is a very adept player with this Rogue deck, doing fairly well last week with it during Specialist alongside his practice partners. But the Priest really is the weird one, isn't it? Like, at this point, Turtle Mage, we've seen it do incredibly well in the Americas. We know what it can do. But just a straight-up kind of control priest, I guess, as opposed to the Highlander Priest, which is much more popular at the moment.
Indeed. Rivius definitely felt like he had something of a control lineup, if you want to call the Turtle Mage a slower deck. It's still debatable on that note, as well as the Demon Hunter, the Soul Demon Hunter, which we were touting as a control deck at the beginning, but also has that alternate game plan, or perhaps primary game plan of just hitting their opponents in the head. Rivius probably taking advantage of just his mastery of decks that people don't necessarily expect him to bring, and that can give him an edge there. For Tiz, on the other hand, we're seeing much more of the conventional decks. I think all 4 of these have been in the upper echelons of popularity in GM so far.
Yeah, I mean, this is, in my opinion, the most cookie-cutter lineup that you could build this week with the Tempo Mage, Secret Rogue, Bomb Warrior, and the Highlander Priest, which is not to say that it's bad at all. You know, predictability, it's predictable for a reason. It's because it's the best, which is why you think everyone is going to be bringing it. These are just, in my opinion, the 4 strongest decks that you could bring to the table for this week, which is perfectly reasonable. And despite not having seen too much of Tiz so far, the little bit that we did see from him, I was, again, fairly impressed, I've got to say, with both him and Bank Yugi being the 2 newcomers that I knew very little about. I've been very pleasantly surprised by their high level of play. Given that, you know, if we look at the Masters Tours, they hadn't earned quite so much prize money as the European Grandmasters that qualified. The competition wasn't quite so stiff in order to get through to APAC, but they've definitely been going above and beyond so far. The question is, like you said, though, can he do the same thing against Rivius's weird, wacky lineups? Right out the gate, he's just getting rid of the Demon Hunter, which I guess is probably because it's kind of like a simulacrum of Bomb Warrior. It just functions fairly similarly for the most part in its matchups.
Yeah, very true. It's worth noting that Rivius just didn't bring Bomb Warrior at
Yeah.
all. I'm not sure if this is a function of the way he expects his lineup to work and Bomb Warrior just doesn't synergize well, or maybe he was expecting more weapon removal in the field. It's perhaps as a side effect of people realizing how much you can target specialist format. In any case, though, I think that if you're going to be bringing these off-the-wall decks as Rivius, then this lineup from Tiz is the perfect one to test against because you did call it cookie cutter. So if Rivius's deck can prove the theory in this
Yeah.
series, I think he would be looking very strong for the rest of the week in his other matchup as well.
I think so, indeed. Specifically looking at his archetypes of the decks, I don't see anything that I especially dislike for the most part. I hear a lot of debate in Secret Rogue as to whether it should be 1 plagiarize, 1 ambush, or double plagiarize, with it seeming like most of the APAC players enjoying another ambush thrown in there, I think, arguably for a bit of tempo, or just unpredictability. You know, being able to definitively say which secret it is after playing 1 spell is a pretty big disadvantage for the rogue. You want to be leaving your opponent guessing at all points. So overall for Tiz here, I think I'm perfectly okay with pretty much all of his lists.
And we will start off with the Turtle Mage immediately, which is For anybody who's only been watching APAC, I wouldn't be surprised if you had no idea this deck existed, but it does very much operate on a combo of the Tortolan Pilgrim, just copying itself infinitely with the Potion of Illusion in the deck, and also alternating with freeze effects to just lock out the card of the opponent. That combo, however, does get shut down if you draw both of the Potions of Illusions naturally, but it doesn't mean that the deck can never win, because it also just plays minions on curve.
Exactly. The kind of the core of the deck is that you only play 3 spells in Frost Nova, Blizzard, and Potion of Illusion. So when you play Tortolan, which discovers and casts a copy of the spell from your deck, you are guaranteed to hit all 3 of those every time you play it. And you can play the Tortolan, get a 1-mana 1 back to the hand, keep copying and comboing that forever and ever, just freezing your opponent indefinitely, and slowly but surely killing them over the course of the game. So once you do hit that critical mass later on in the game, the rogue can pretty much just pack up and leave once the infinite chain of Tortolans comes down. Where the real difference in the matchup comes, how you can swing this in your advantage, is the early game. That is where you have to try and lock down the board, get a huge questing, get a huge Edwin, and tempo the mage out of the game.
That's right. This mage actually doesn't have single target removal outside of Firebrand. If you want to stretch the definition of single target removal a little bit, it plays freezes. So if the Edwins and Questings come down before they can actually start chaining the Blizzards and Frost Novas, then the mage is in a lot of trouble. But you're right, once they reach that crucial point of 8 and 9 mana with the potion still in the deck, then it gets super dicey for the rogue, even running Eviscerates, because mage also runs Carted Defenders and even Earthen Farseer, which can get copied by Potion of Illusion. And to help that combo be more consistent, you're running Lorekeeper Polkelt, and you're running Sphere of Safety.
Yeah, Sphere is the big one, because it means as soon as you find Potion of Illusion on the top of your deck, you just say, right, I would like to put that on the bottom of my deck, please, Sphere, and never ever draw it. Whereas Lorekeeper Polkelt, obviously, it orders your deck from highest to lowest cost card. So you're on a timer. Eventually, you will draw Potion of Illusion, and your combo will fall apart. But as you said, the deck does not need that to win. It can just win on tempo a lot of the time.
We are hitting the stages where the questing is active and looking very powerful here. One Thief going to activate this Vendetta, and at 4 HP, there's very limited ways that Rivius can deal with this questing, so Tiz can reasonably just pop off even more with the Secret Passage next turn.
Oh, it's a close one, isn't it? Because there are ways that it can die. You know, we're looking at discovering something from Wand Thief. If he goes missiles Wand Thief into, I don't know, Brain Freeze or Frostbolt, if he gets a lucky missile. Obviously, Firebrand missiles could clear it off on this next turn. But the value potential is so much higher if you go for Secret Passage next turn that I think we are likely to see him wait.
Yes, the biggest punish I would say here is the one of Sunreaver Warmage, the 5 mana 4/4 that says if you are holding a spell that costs 5 or more, deal 4 damage. So it looks like Tiz is actually just gonna go in this turn to play around that and the generations that you were talking about, but he only has 1 mana to work with off of this passage.
I mean, he only has 5 seconds to work with off of this passage, which is the real scary bit right now.
It's true, you just ripped the other path. Okay, Dragon's Sword.
Dragon's Sword, go. Play it.
Did you have time? Do you have time?
Okay, doesn't matter what you got, just play it. And Shenval is actually pretty good.
Isn't that insane in Rogue? Probably not after you've used Coin and Prep, but you know, very much for Tiz, I think he was just expecting this passage to be a buff on the questing, and it's very lucky if you get any actual value off of it, which is a reasonable way of approaching this because the questing is his main win card.
Yikes is what I will now say for Rivius. He can damage, I suppose, if he's lucky. This questing.
Oh, he didn't kill off the poison.
Yikes. Just play him. Just play both you guys.
Yep. Look very powerful. Rivius. Oh man, he has a Kartut to stall, but it's so far off from even reaching 8 mana, and let alone he doesn't have the Tortolan in hand. He can curate it with the Lorekeeper Polkelt, but that's a turn of no defense.
This is a little interesting. Obviously, turn 6 is heading into Blizzard, which is why I think he wants to clear off the spell damage, but I don't know, even having said that, like, if he clears off Hanar, that's still a questing. Even if frozen for a turn, you've tempoed out a little bit more. I think you have to rely a little bit more on the top of your deck.
For Rivius, it was interesting too. We could have seen Polkelt Wanderer, and then you just say, I'm going Cartoon 100% the next turn, and then I have Pilgrim the turn after that. But that's not necessarily giving him a win condition without the other Tortolan in hand.
Yeah, I mean, that's a gamble, right? Because that says on turn 8, when you go Blizzard or Frost Nova, if it sticks, you can go Potion of Illusion and kind of just win the game there on it, or at least be in with a real chance of winning it. But if you don't go for that, if they can kill off the 5/5, then you're just conceding the game, effectively.
And that's also just assuming that the card would give him time to live if he played it the next turn, which is very optimistic.
Yeah.
But this is just 17 damage for Tiz now, and get the questing up to 13. A little bit short, so we are just going to see a Tortolan get played next turn in all likelihood.
Right, so the plan now is Tortolan, Freeze, Potion of Illusion, and then you can go Tortolan, Potion, Tortolan, Potion, Tortolan, Freeze there afterwards. The combo does start to happen after that point.
It gets very scary indeed. For Tiz, though, there's probably that reason in particular to hold on to Blackjack Stunner as a potential answer from hand for just Tortolan Blizzard next turn.
Okay.
Because at this point, he knows that's the only way he's losing, right? Is if the chain happens. Rivy is shaking his head. He's expecting a secret train to buff this questing, but the train ends here.
And trading off, I suppose, to play around like Blizzard trade to actually clear the questing for once.
You're in my hands.
But at this point, he knows that Tortolan is for sure in hand because of the health.
So, if this minion dies, it's not game over instantly, right? Because he has the other Tortolan to come off the top of his deck, which can then... That one has to be the one that pops off at that point, right? That one does have to survive.
Combustion is a clear. That's so huge with the dagger.
That's huge.
You can get rid of the Tortolan, and that gives Tiz a little bit of breathing room.
It's something, and you have to take it.
Yep. Okay, so next draw is Tortolan again. Tiz has one card in hand. Very unlikely that he can deal with the second one. Rivius knows this is a reborn, by the way. It was Restless Mummy.
Yep.
It's scary, but you probably have a read that it's not Restless because it would have been played by now. Oh wait, this is the 9-mana turn. Never mind.
Okay,
Just...
sure. Yeah. Well, he can't pop off, but what he can do is give himself an extra minion to survive for the following turn. So it has to be a 5/5 and a 1/1 that's cleared off, which is not happening. The train ends here for Tiz, and the 5/5 sticks.
Means it can be potioned, and more blizzards can come for days and days and days.
You're in my hands.
Potion,
now.
potion, blizzard, potion. You do the combo here. You keep generating more and more one-cost primes while also healing up for 1 million at the same time. Why not throw it in there?
In my hands now.
And we did, for the first game, actually get to see the primary win condition of Turtle Mage come to fruition, which is not what happened in our testing so much. It was a lot of early Potions of Illusions and Imprisoned Observers that can also give this deck a way to win. But when you do hit this spot and manage to survive until turn 8, turn 9 with the Tortolans, there is little to nothing that anyone can do to stop it. Very dominant performance from Rivius with first Turtle Mage in April.
Very, very nicely done. Nothing that could be done at all at the end there. Even if it was like you were saying, Restless Mummy, it's merely a ticking time bomb until Tiz does unfortunately take the loss there. And right out of the gate, we're already seeing Turtle Mage laughed at by everyone, called a meme deck when it was first hit the scene. Honestly, when I first saw this list out of context without seeing it being played, I had no idea what the win condition was. I could not even fathom how you tried to make this work. But in the end, it becomes clear, obviously, with the Tortolans able to do the combo over and over again. A very Rivius deck and a very Rivius game to get his first win of the day on the table. Looking at a good spot, I think, now with the Secret Mage and the Control Priest to be in a good spot against the fairly standard lineup that Tiz has left waiting in the wings. So when we come back from this break, we're going to see if Rivius can go all the way and just clean sweep with his wacky lineup, or if, similar to our first series of the day, we're going to see the reverse sweep on the other side. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us once again here on Hearthstone Grandmasters on the Hearthstone Esports YouTube channel, where you can catch all the action, both Grandmasters and, in fact, Masters Tour, which is going to kick off next week. We have a unique little weekend-long tournament, Masters Tour Montreal, obviously being held remotely, given everything that's going on, but it should still be a fantastic weekend. The Masters Tours really feel like uniquely exciting events, each one so distinct from all the others, and so important in terms of who we may be seeing in next season's time here in APAC Grandmasters, depending on who does well there.
Yes, we get to see new blood come in through the Masters Tour system, and one of the recent inclusions because of the Masters Tour is Tiz in this current series, currently down 0-1 against Rivius, but I think has been playing very well whenever we do get to see him on stream. Now, before the break, Daruk, you mentioned how Turtle Mage, when you first saw it, you did not know what the win condition would be just looking at the list
No
in
idea.
a vacuum. That is how I feel about Rivius's Priest, which has a bunch of 2-ofs, a bunch of control cards. It has Galakrond, but no invokes. It feels like this might be the first bona fide control deck we've seen in a long time.
It does feel like that. I mean, we saw something similar to this from, was it Shaxi a few weeks ago, I believe, who was running like a version that had the double Spellkin, double Wand Maker in his list as well, in order to go like maximum 1 mana spell being generated. But, you know, for the most part, I think it's clear that it's going to function as a tempo deck, I would actually argue, more so than a control deck. It looks weird because it's a bunch of, like, disparate parts that have to combo together, but that there, I think, is the real beauty of the deck. When you have double Spellkin, and in particular, double Cleric of Scales, your ability to consistently find the combo cards you need to make your powerful little tricks work is very, very high. You can always hit the Wave of Apathy Cabal Acolyte, especially when you hit it in your starting hand here, like Rivius has.
That is indeed perhaps the most powerful combo in the Priest list, and it's a reason why Cabal Acolyte is getting hit by the nerfs next week, going down to 4 HP from 6. This deck from Rivius also includes Raised Dead, which I always feel looks out of place when there's no Zephrys to go along with it, and also no Disciple of God, because that version is what Tyler is running. But if it can just give you more Clerics of Scales, more Cabal Acolytes, and Cobalt Spellkins, that is something of a consistency / value generator in and of itself.
I definitely agree with you there. I think even ignoring the Invoking of Galakron, just having a couple of extra 1-drops in the deck, rezzing them for very easily dumping your hand whilst also generating more value is super powerful, and definitely something that I would look at for Rivius's list. But I'm sure he has reasoning behind his own testing and the conclusion that he came to with this slightly lower 1-drop, lower tempo version of Priest.
And while it is a lot more anti-aggro, I assume with the double Shadow Word Deaths, it's still very well positioned to deal with the type of aggro that this rogue presents, which tends to be just 1 minion very, very tall. I just wonder if this rogue actually has potential to win on value instead, because this doesn't run any invokes from the priest, so they're going to be generating less minions for sure.
Yeah, I think value to an extent. I think the way it works is you want to generate enough value to have a threat each turn, and then you're not going to be fatiguing the priest, most likely. The way it's going to go instead is you're going to have just enough value to outlast their removal. They're going to have 1 turn where they can't clear off the board, then you go for the throat. It's why I was looking, I've got to say, actually Apexis Blast as that pick is I think what I would have chosen there, because even though it's less flexible than the Arcane Missiles, it's 5 damage to the face, which is always an opportunity I'm looking at against Priest.
That was very interesting, but with the 2 5-drops in hand, I understand why his went for Arcane Missiles instead, and it also combos off with something like this top deck right here, Questing Adventure. He can potentially put it to... actually, it's not very clean, right? If you want to get it to max size, then you would likely expend Secret Passage, which does not work out very well with the mana available. I wanted to suggest putting it to 4/4, but I also don't see a clean way of doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, what, Prep Missiles is kind of the best I'm seeing, which is a bit sad, because it's not especially effective there.
Yeah, it feels like a wasted prep. But given that in the near future, the prep is not likely to cheat out any more than 1 mana,
yeah,
I think it's fine to expend it, just to get this questing out of range of Penance. And
yeah, I guess that's the real bit. Like, I was going to say that it's like the Shadow Word Pain that you're really afraid of at 3, but it is the Penance that you bring up that you're really afraid of. And you can follow up next turn with Jandis, which means if Death comes down, that's fine, because you got 2 5-drops hitting them in the face. If it gets stolen by Cabal Acolyte, it's scary, of course, but there are ways that he can then develop onto the board and hopefully wrestle things back.
Well, here is the first 50-50, Rivius nodding to himself. Yep, that's a questing stolen.
Okay, well, I mean, when I said this is salvageable, it's not looking great for Tiz. It does mean he has to deviate away from the plan he was looking at, but does end up with Professor Slate.
Again!
For a backstab clear on the Cultist? That's huge!
That's awesome. It has 100% got to be the play, of course, correct order with the Vendetta. Well, this is very flashy. It does seem like Rivius still has a lot of juice in hand, being able to raise dead back his cultist at the very least.
That's true, yeah. And then steal the Miscreant right back, of course, looking very powerful.
Another wave of apathy. Oh, doesn't take it.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to combo with, so I think trying to like steal the dragon, or maybe even, as we can see here, a secret passage would be pretty huge as well.
That's fair. I mean, the wave of apathy would hardly have gotten any use that turn. Speaking of secret passage, Tiz is going to rip the first one, looking for an Edwin here or a secret with this Blackrock Center.
Oh, this could be a big deal. Pharaoh Cat, if it can hit a class-specific minion, which it doesn't, would have been huge with Vendetta on that turn.
So now it's probably just double 2-drop. As sad as it is to play the Gnar like this.
Oh man, I have my questions. Like, that was a very, very quick secret passage on that turn when he had 2 very powerful 5-drop plays to throw down. Like, yes, there's Slate in play, so backstab being found is pretty huge. But he's already used one, you know, right? Like, it was already a powerful play on that turn.
Yeah, fair point. Does end up with just a Neophyte for his troubles. And Rivius is the first to put down a lot of pressure and gets a rush minion.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're in this spot against Priest, having to play from behind and every single turn Apotheosis is a threat, it's just a nightmare for Rogue.
Yeah, and while you can make the argument that he didn't go for like Jandice or Waxadread last turn because he was afraid of Soul Mirror, I suppose, being able to steal both of those plays, it's still something he's afraid of now, right? Like, this Soul Mirror is just as good against this board as it would have been against the last board that he threw down.
Even probably more backbreaking right now.
Yeah.
Pyro in the list as a 2-of, combos well with Apotheosis, and also a bunch of the cheap spells that you'll be generating from Cobalt's Spellkin.
So, questing, Pyro, Wave of Apathy, there's nothing else to combo with that. It doesn't work out too
I'm
cleanly.
kind of just looking at trading in the Jandice and going for Breath of the Infinite, even though it damages his own minions.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
And then he can put down questing Bow Pyro, question mark? I think he's just that far ahead.
Yeah, he's seen a lot of the reactive cards already, hasn't he?
Okay. Valuing 2 health on the taunt more than +1/+1 on the questing, I think makes a ton of sense as well. Especially since in Bizarro World, he sometimes needs to save that Pyro as panic switch.
And you really could not have asked for a more beautiful showcase of why Cabal Acolyte or Wave of Apathy needs to be touched in some way, I think, because it was literally just drawing those 2 cards, I think, that put Rivius so far in the lead here. Obviously, Raise Dead to go again, so much tempo being gained with these pseudo mind control effects, and I mean, when you're throwing the Skeletal Drake as well here, this has to just be over.
Yeah, it was such a perfect generation for Rivius because it's value where he didn't have any in hand, and it also activates the Cleric of Scales while getting down on board. It's very over indeed.
It is. The one question I do have from Tiz is about his use of Secret Passage on that turn. Everything else up until then I thought was pretty spot on. I loved his choice to go for the 4/4 questing that you were laying out. It was really just when he could have played out a decent play on turn 6, sorry. He instead deviated and did not find whatever cards he was looking for.
And now for Rivius, just laying out how he can end the game as soon as possible and bar out any chance of another secret passage, potentially making his life difficult. But even though that could come off the top, I don't think there's a 5-card combination that can pull Tiz out of this.
Doesn't feel like it, does it? Like, he doesn't have a death in hand anymore, so maybe you just take death, because like that's the only way that you lose is some huge Edwin being generated. Even then, you have Soul Mirror. Like, I don't even know. All these crazy situations we're trying to pull out, I don't see any of them working.
Ends up going for Raise Dead there, hitting the questing as additional threats on the board. I think all of the choices were winning for Rivius there.
It looks that way. So, Secret Passage is the out now for Tiz to have any chance whatsoever of staying alive on this board.
I was
That
thinking
is
of
not bad.
Prep Dragons for Death. Wait, that's not even a class card. Oh.
I like your thinking though. I like where your head's at. It does mean, however, Rivius is bringing us up to a lightning fast 2-0 victory. Even with his relatively slow lineup, it's got to be said, the Turtle Mage, sorry, Control Priest, Soul Demon Hunter, obviously being banned away, and now the one class that he has left to take a win with, Gia, being his choice last week for Specialist, what he thought was the single best class out of all 10 to be brought to a single class format. Surely he's got to be feeling pretty good now about being in this spot with the Rogue.
He absolutely should. I just still am wondering if the lineup was specifically built to target something, because when I see the Soul Demon Hunter and a slower Priest and a slower Mage, it definitely feels as though you're trying to prey on some of the more aggressive decks in the meta that fall prey to removal pretty easily. But this Rogue doesn't really fit into the equation that much. I think that this Rogue helps a bit with removal, especially when it doesn't hit the Blackjack stunners. But it could just be that Rivius thinks these are the 4 best decks, and that could very much be the case. We're in a meta where a lot of the matchups are, 51%. There's no heavy favorites at the moment. So if you feel like you can get that little bit of edge by playing decks that your opponent is not familiar with, that is absolutely a valid strategy as well.
Very much so. I do wonder how Rivius's list in particular is going to function against his, because it feels like it's cut a couple of the anti-aggro tools. You know, one-off backstab in there is very possibly losing some percentage against just being tempoed out at the start of the game. He does have one Spy Mistress thrown in there as well, which kind of functions like a pseudo backstab. But I am curious about his list. It's definitely not one that I've seen with specifically these combination of cards before. Especially with a very secret-heavy build, double Dirty Tricks, double Plagiarize, and an Ambush thrown in there as well. It's not how most players would build this, for sure.
That's right. It's cutting Eviscerates as well, which I feel like is kind of the more fashionable thing to do at the moment, but I haven't seen people cut Backstab, so it could be that Rivius doesn't actually see this as an anti-aggro deck. But that opener is looking pretty solid indeed.
Yeah, that's pretty huge, it's got to be said. Spy Mistress has recently, I think, gotten a fair bit better against Rogue, given that against Mage, sorry, given that they have started cutting Arcane Missiles, a lot of them not even running Devolving Missiles. And Violet Spellwing here, you know, even as a 1-1 that gives you Arcane Missiles, it's kind of going to be difficult for it to die for a while to kill off this Spy Mistress.
Yeah, it could be. Rivius probably likely to dagger it down on the next turn, but he's saving the Spy Mistress altogether because if he goes dagger on the Spellwing, then it gets eaten by the missiles. Instead, we could just be seeing double 1-drop from Rivius on turn 2 to activate the 1.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you're going for that plan, he may as well have just played the Spy Mistress, because I know that activates the 1 Thief, but then like attack in and play the missiles is so much lost tempo that I don't think it's worth the generated Mage spell that you acquire thereafter. Just about.
So, Secret instead. Okay, now that I'm reconfiguring all these early events, it now feels like Rivius's plan was to save all the 1-drops for the questing turn instead. And with the Shadow Step, that plan looks a lot more solid.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting though, right? Because this is a good questing turn here. Being able to go questing, coin with the 1 Thief and Shadow Step it. But you know what's really good against Mage? It's Shadow Stepping Cult Neophyte instead. So being able to go questing, coin, Neophyte, step, Neophyte next turn, I think is something that Rivius may deliberately move towards as opposed to popping off with the questing on this turn.
It's a really tough decision because if you hold the Neophyte, then the turn becomes Spy Mistress 1 Thief, which runs into the problem you were talking about a while ago of the just trade in the Spellwing and go for Arcane Missiles. Rivius was toying with the idea for sure, but he's instead just choosing to pop off here. Getting down the questing as soon as possible definitely has its merits as well. You make the argument that if you hold off Cult Neophyte, then Tiz just, say, develops a Firebrand that turn. You're kind of giving Tiz tempo in that sense as well.
Wow, Rivius holding back on the evocation there as well. Obviously, he has stuff to do, for the next few turns, undeniably. But Evocation is pretty good in its own right. And when you combo it with the power of Secret Passage to get back all those mage spells, it becomes ludicrously strong.
His hand is double giants with hardly any generation. It is looking really, really rough for him right now. Probably could just see this Spellwing trade in and a ping. Or actually, maybe you just need to play both of the spells and follow up with Raz.
Yeah.
Hope that you can get the giants down ASAP. I don't think he can put together a significant enough Cyclone to warrant saving the spells.
Yeah, like he could double Cyclone next turn, but then he's not playing Raz Frost Whisper here. And if he plays both the spells, he has the option to go Mana Giant next turn as well. I think you got to be tempoing out here instead of saving up for a big combo.
You can just go for the world where you're losing so hard that you need to be super optimistic with the missiles and then trade in the ambush instead.
Yeah.
Okay, it's holding back altogether. So it looks like it's going to be a Cyclone game plan instead of the Raz, which can maybe work if he gets Apprentice next turn.
Kreen as well is pretty nutty here. It's got to be said. If they just play a Giant, how about you slam that down and just trade your questing adventure into it next turn?
I don't want the Dragon Bane.
Oh, you're so degenerate.
I mean, yes, you know my habits, Dark. I love going face. The Kreen this turn just doesn't feel overly significant because
Not this
I feel
turn.
like the 2-3 was just gonna go in the O6. And so for the next turn, Dragon Bane Hero Power seems like wait, that's in
two turns away. Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect, I think, example of both of us. You are a go-face gamer, and I, much to my humiliation, I'm a trade gamer. There's no two ways around it.
Well, either way, it's super significant that Rivius gets down his Cult Neophyte because now Tiz can only play one spell if he wants to play Mana Cyclone. So I guess we're just going to see another ping.
Yeah, like it's approaching the point where if Tiz gets a Sorcerer's Apprentice, on the following turn, it could be big enough for him to pop off and win the game. You know, if he goes questing, plays all his spells, Cyclone, gets an Evocation, he can get down double Giant, maybe generate a Frost Nova. Like, there are real outs here for Tiz. But it's looking slimmer and slimmer as this questing gets bigger and bigger.
Indeed. And Tiz also has the looming threat of Plagiarize, even if he were to top deck the Apprentice, but that is not the case.
It's not Plagiarize. Okay, so you can afford to go in, play a bunch of your spells and the Cyclone here. It's not bad. You could go for, you know, again, Ray of Frost, freeze the big guy, because he's got to start doing something here. This is not conducive to a victory right now.
Just needs a bunch of Novas and a box. That's all it is.
It's one way to get them.
The Neophyte is really backbreaking because he just couldn't get the Cyclone turn off last turn, which means he couldn't play Astromancer this turn, which means there's no chance of top decking Prime for the next turn.
Okay, keeping the train rolling. Just more value than you could ever ask for here for Rivius now. Sure.
Push the one. I love it.
Right, yeah, okay, fair enough.
I mean, like you said, he has value for days. He has Dragon Bane Hero Power, so clearing up the board makes sense.
So, freeze again. It could just be Archmage, draw, or Astromancer, sorry, not Archmage. Astromancer, freeze, Cram Session.
Yeah, Cram Session first.
Sure.
Or Mage Secret, I suppose. Oh, if that came earlier, that
Okay.
Apprentice could have been huge.
It's something though, right? This is still technically winnable, I'm going to say. Oh, if it hadn't been Spellbender in order to get that out of the way. Otherwise, it would have been winnable there for Tiz. But with that, it does mean that the questing can just connect face, and there is no out whatsoever.
And the peace sign from Rivius, a clean 3-0. Extremely extremely dominant performance. Is not somebody who is showing his stress very much on camera, but that one's gotta hurt.
Yeah, I mean, there was the line there at the end with the 3 mana left available before he went for Frostbolt, where he could have gone specifically for the magic trick to find Ray of Frost and then go double Ray of Frost, so it plays around Spellbender. But I think that's very much with the read that it's Spellbender, which you do not have. It could have been a bunch of different things like the Ice Barrier and the Vaporize. So I do not begrudge Tiz for that line. However, I also do not begrudge Rivius for being back on form and absolutely dominating. That was the cleanest 3-0 sweep I've seen in a very long time.
And those 2 games at the end did not look anywhere near close. That Turtle Mage game was getting a little bit scary when it was the big questing on the other side and Rivius had to take one risky turn with the Kartut. But after he had cleared that round of threats, it seemed like he was home free. He knew exactly what to do turn after turn, optimized it, and just got probably one of the fastest series I've ever seen with decks that tend to be the of the Priest and the Mage.
Indeed. I think doing it as we would expect from Rivius, one of the biggest innovators that we have here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. And I love the idea altogether. It was a weird end, it's got to be said, altogether from Rivius, because like even thinking back on it, there was like for Tiz, there was the opportunity to go for the Sorcerer's Apprentice at the end in order to try and get down a whole bunch more spells. It was a weird end there altogether. But either way, it does mean that Rivius is our victor, taking the first win here and going up to a strong start despite him being in Division B. And now, as we are doing for most of our matches today, we're taking another look at Division B here. Alan versus Kin, 2 players who have had pretty interesting routes along their varied time lengths here in Grandmasters.